As we all know, Austin ISD recently closed 4 campuses permanently, and as many as 8 more campuses were discussed as possible closures at a later date. What have you learned about the school closures during this most recent process, and how would you approach future decisions regarding school closures once you're a trustee? And we'd like to begin this round of questioning with Jared.
Awesome. So yes, this is another big reason why I decided to run for the school board, because I know, and prior to this past set of school closures, I knew which one of our schools would be ultimately impacted, and I knew it would happen in our District 1 and our District 2 mostly. And so, as you stated, basically the other 8 schools, they're coming, whether we're ready or not, they're coming, and it's very important that we make sure that we do not disrupt school communities. It's also important that we make sure that we explore other options before we choose just to close down schools. There were so many other options that we could have explored, but I feel like our district took the easy route out. And so as a school board trustee, you would have me on there basically saying, number one, we're gonna put a cap on how many schools we can close in one part of our district. In addition to that, we're gonna explore more options. We're not just gonna go for the easy route out. And then last but not least, we're also going to put a cap on, I guess, demographics of students. And then, of course, making a more transparent process. I think most of our families and our staff members and all of that would have accepted this plan had it been more transparent and done in collaboration. And I think that if we move along and say, for instance, that is the last thing, if we do it in that kind of way, you might have a little bit more buy-in, but as for me, if there's any inequities, it'd be a solid no.
Okay, same question, Leticia.
Thank you, Roxanne. What we saw with these closures is this process was not transparent. There was not engagement, and it was very, very painful for many families and staff. And so going into the future, I think we've got to let communities know, neighborhoods know, schools know what the conversation is and why, and look for alternatives. I think the best thinking comes from our communities when we engage them and share with them, here's the challenge, here's what we're facing, what solution, let's problem solve how we fix this, what can we do. If it's a budget issue, if it's a declining enrollment issue, let's address that. Let's find out why that's happening, and let's do that instead of going towards the closure route. This conversation is not going to go away. We know we're going to have budget stresses, and so we've got to start engaging the communities now, or as soon as we're back fully in person, so we can start kind of gaining some of that best thinking on what we can do moving forward so that we don't have to go down this road of closures.
Thank you. Mike, same question.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Leticia in the process that was engaged was flawed from day one. It didn't create a scenario where people knew what was going to happen. There's no reason that a district can't have a set of guidelines for when a new school is built or when a school is closed and exactly how that works there. And I think that addresses a lot of what Jared was talking about, in the sense that we can't over address one community in town. And so for me, I served on the district's boundary advisory committee during the time of the school closures. And what I truly felt like what was happening was that committee was in a room talking about which wealthy families were going to get access to a new Southwest elementary school, while at the exact same time in a different room, a different group of people were talking about which schools on the east side of town were going to be closed. And we weren't allowed to talk to each other. And this is one of the reasons that I decided to run for the board. I felt like this boundary process in itself was overt systemic segregation. It's why I talk about the need to eliminate boundaries over time, because they will continue to serve to segregate the district. At the time of the school closures, we had many campuses in the district that were at almost 130% capacity. And so if we actually looked at that district-wide and not just in little silos across town, I don't know that we would have had to close 4 schools. Maybe we still would have, but we need to look at every possible option before coming to closure. That has to be the last thing chosen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And last, Nolita.
Thank you for this question. So yeah, I absolutely agree. We must never repeat the bungled school closure process of 2019, which seemed to have the district paying more attention to PRing its way out of the problem using Arrow at work, rather than treating students, caregivers, parents, teachers as real partners in the process. So a specific example would be, instead of inviting busy parents and caregivers to a facilities master plan, why not say designing a plan to replace older campuses, right? Simple, straightforward language. Instead of school changes and modernization, how about preparing for school closures and consolidations? As I mentioned earlier, really listening first to understand, and understanding that our board members are public servants first and foremost. As a public servant myself, I've had to confront situations where parents and community members have felt stressed and upset and angry, and I treat them with respect and I treat them with empathy. That's what I think we should have seen from AISD. One last thing, and I'm going to squeeze this in, for anyone who was serving on an AISD advisory body during school closures and saw the plan's inequity, we could have really used you by our side. Jared and I were there with many others.